Welcome to Therapy in the Great Outdoors, a podcast about the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy of all kinds. If you are a nature-loving therapist who works with children, this podcast will help you start taking your work outdoors into nature and help you grow a profitable nature-based therapy practice or program that connects children to nature and changes their lives and yours forever. I'm your host, the ever honest, always 100% real, Laura Park Figueroa. I have been a pediatric occupational therapist for over 20 years. But 7 years ago, I almost left the field entirely. I was so burned out. And nature-based therapy is what saved me. It reignited my love of my work, and I saw profound changes in the children that I was working with. I'm the founder of Outdoor Kids OT and the creator of the TGO approach, an evidence-based framework for nature-based pediatric therapy services. I've helped dozens of pediatric therapists start and grow successful nature-based practices through my business coaching and online programs, the latest of which is the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community, TGO for short. TGO is an online membership site with loads of resources to support you every step of the way as you start and grow your nature-based therapy work. You can find out more at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. Working outdoors with children can be a wild ride. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's jump in. Hello, friends. I am coming at you live today from inside of my car. If you didn't know, a car is a great place to record a podcast. The sound quality is really wonderful because it's a small enclosed space. So I am parked here near a little lake near my son's middle school because I have a meeting in about 30 minutes and I wanted to use this time to record because I have a really busy day today. So I brought my laptop and my microphone and I'm sitting in the front seat of my car looking at a beautiful lake across a field here and the sun is shining. It's a beautiful fall day here in Madison, Wisconsin, where I live. Yes, my practice is in California. I run it remotely. So I want to talk with you all today about some things I've been thinking about related to the sustainability and longevity of running a nature-based pediatric therapy practice. And I think I'm going to title this episode, Why Nature-Based Therapy is Here to Stay, because I have been coming across all of these things in my reading about business, in my thinking about business, and in the research that I'm doing on nature-based occupational therapy. And all of it is kind of coalescing in my brain to reassure me, and I want to share that with you, that nature-based therapy is a practice setting that I believe we are only going to see more and more growth in, and that is only going to become more and more desirable to consumers, to families. So I want to go through some of those reasons, some of the things I'm thinking, and either encourage you in the work that you're doing or convince you to start doing work outdoors with kids. So one of the first things that made me want to record this episode was that in my research, something that surprised me, but I suppose it shouldn't have surprised me. But in my research, I noticed that many of the therapists so I interviewed 22 occupational therapists. And I do know, I always say this on this podcast is not intended just for an OT audience. So if you are in a different profession, I think listen to this and think about your own profession, because I do know speech therapists are starting to take work outdoors, and I know that mental health counselors have been doing this for years. So I wonder if you know if it's different in your field or not, then come share that inside of the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community. I would love to hear about other professions. But for me right now, doing research in the field of occupational therapy, many of the therapists who participated were very experienced. I think 17, don't quote me on this, I don't have the data right in front of me, but I think 17 of the 22 people I interviewed had more than 6 years of experience, and about half of them had more than 10 years of experience. One of them had more than 30 years of experience as an OT and like 21 to 30 years of experience as a nature-based practice in a nature-based practice setting. So that's really indicative that there are experienced therapists starting to do this work, right? The difference between the number of years that they were licensed and had experience as an OT versus the number of years they had been in nature-based practice was vast. So something like more than half of the people had less than 5 years of experience providing nature-based services. So what we're seeing in this very small little snippet of data, I mean, my study was not a quantitative study, so I'm not statistically analyzing this or anything like that. It was just data that I gathered to help me understand the people that I was interviewing. And what it seems to show from my deduction from this information is that experienced therapists are entering nature-based practice. And the qualitative data from the interviews that I've done seems to indicate that many experienced therapists were or did enter nature-based practice as a result of feeling very burned out and frustrated in other practice settings in which they worked as a pediatric therapist. So I think this first point I want to make is that it is a way to renew your love and your passion of your work again. I think that's very clear from almost everyone I talk to in my research and just in my relationships with people. I know that it really can reignite your love of your profession and your work with kids and your work with families and like working in a way that gives you a little bit of freedom and is healthy for you as well to get outdoors. So, okay, I could go on and on about that one, but I think that's one reason that it will stay here is that we're not seeing other practice settings innovating and changing and becoming better places for therapists to work. What we're seeing is actually the opposite. Like insurance standards just keep getting higher, productivity standards in hospitals just keep getting worse. So I think therapists really long for the freedom to work on their own terms and to practice pediatric therapy in a way that feels good to them. Okay, so that's one reason it will stay is that it's fun. Okay. Another thing that I noticed recently, and maybe you have too, is that the concept of forest schools and nature play and outdoor play is becoming so much more widely accepted in the broader media. And what really nailed this home for me was that I got the Costco Connection magazine that Costco sends to all its members. And this was probably 4 to 6 months ago. It isn't a recent issue, and I tend to like glance at it and then throw it away because it's 99% full of ads or like depictions of their products. So you can see what you need to spend money on to fill your house with junk next time you go to Costco. Anyways, I won't go down that rabbit hole. So in the Costco magazine, there was an article about the prevalence of outdoor educational programs and like how these are a great alternative for people. And it probably, coming out of the tail end of COVID, a lot of people were aware that being outdoors was one of the better places to be during COVID. And it just hit home for me that like, oh my gosh, the Costco magazine. I mean, what could be more mainstream? What could be like, that's not a magazine where you would expect to see an article on outdoor play or on nature play or on connecting to nature. And so I love that this idea is becoming more widely accepted in the mainstream media and the mainstream cultural awareness, at least here in America. So I really do think that this indicates that we will start to see more and more nature-based practices coming into existence because the same way, this is kind of along the same lines, this was supposed to be point number 3 on my little very rough outline, the same way that forest schools have increased. So outdoor schools, I looked up the data on Google here. The closest thing I could find was that the number of forest kindergartens and outdoor preschools in the U.S. has more than doubled since 2017. And this was a 2020 number. So I'm sure since then, this is 2022 now. So even 2 years later, I'm sure that number has become even higher. So along those same lines, right? Being outdoors, running services outdoors is becoming more mainstream. Now, what that poses for us as nature-based therapists, if you are currently practicing as a nature-based therapist, what that means is you better be on your A game. You better have your systems in place. You better be offering a really high quality service because there is more competition coming in your area. You are not going to be the only nature-based practice forever and ever. I think a lot of us, I did this when I first started out. A lot of us think like, oh, I have this edge because I'm doing something new and innovative and nobody can compete because there's no one else competing and doing outdoor services. And then sure enough, like multiple people cropped up right in my area who are doing nature-based occupational therapy services. So you can't rely on just the outdoors being your niche that sets you apart as a practice owner of a pediatric practice. I really want nature-based practice owners to think about what is unique about your practice. Not just that you're outdoors in nature, but if there start to become other nature-based therapy practices in your area, why will a customer come to you? What is going to be your unique niche besides just being outdoors in nature? So just a little thought to all of you. I think it's really important business planning to do to understand why your business is unique and different. I have talked with so many therapists in my business coaching services about this because we rely on the fact that we're the only person in town doing XYZ, even if it's not just in nature-based practice, but like an SI clinic or a feeding clinic or whatever you may have as a pediatric practice owner. If you're PT, sport medicine services for kids, whatever. It really is only a matter of time probably before you have real competition in your market. And I think as business owners, or even if you're just running a program, you need to be aware of how you are different than others. Okay, I have nailed that topic to like death here, and I will move on because I'm sure you're tired of hearing me drone on and on about how you need to be different. Okay. The last thing is that I know you all know this already, but the fact that Facebook is now Meta and is saying that they are going to have these alternate virtual universes, and the fact that they are specifically targeting, I just heard, again, this episode, I'm riffing in this episode about things I've heard recently in the media and what I've been thinking about them. And I just heard on my news podcast that I listen to, shout out to the Newsworthy. It's a great podcast, all the day's news in less than 10 minutes. I love it. I listen to it like when I just am driving to the gym or whatever, just to stay up to date on what's going on in the world. It's so great and I love it. So I'm going to give a shout out to Erica Mandy and the Newsworthy podcast. So anyway, on my news podcast, she mentioned that Roblox now has like a game that is, or Walmart partnered with Roblox to offer some kind of metaverse for kids that is like aimed at like 7 to 10-year-olds or something. And I just was livid upon hearing this because of course it's a way for them to make money. And she's like, they say they're not going to make money on the game. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not true at all. It's all motivated by money. It's the commercialization of childhood, which makes me furiously angry and is really something that I think as therapists, as pediatric therapists, we should be very concerned about. But again, that's another rabbit hole I could go down and I'll try not to. But with all this increasing tech, right, we are going to need nature connection even more desperately in the future. And I don't want to be a nihilist. I don't want to be negative, right? But realistically, we are moving towards an environment where people are going to be living, really. I mean, the word living is actually going to change in meaning, I think, are going to be living in these virtual reality spaces. It's like my brain can't even comprehend it. But I know as a nature-based practitioner that the connection of children to nature is only going to become more and more and more important in the coming decades because our health is inextricably linked to the Earth's health. And when we become detached from the Earth disintegrates. And when the Earth is not healthy, we are not healthy. I didn't explain that very well. You know what I mean. When the Earth is not healthy, we are not healthy, and vice versa, right? So we're inextricably bound together. We are a part of nature. Us humans are a part of nature. Honestly, nature would probably do better in some ways without us messing around with her. But anyway, but I do want to say that, I wanted to share this funny story with you. So I kind of was in one of our Contigo approach calls that we have. We do, so anybody who joins the Contigo course online, if you're interested, you can go to contigoapproach.com and get on the wait list. We open enrollment every few months or so. And for every person who enrolls, we have quarterly mentoring calls that they can attend for life, for like as long as they want to. We do them 4 times a year, every few months. And we talk about the Contigo approach. We talk about nature-based practice, and we support people in starting their outdoor work with children on these calls. And on one of the calls, I posed a kind of like devil's advocate question. Like I was posing a question that I thought I kind of knew what people would answer, but I wanted to throw it out there for discussion. And one of the things I said was, do you ever think, like, we have this idea that humans have evolved, right, in connection with nature. And that's part of the argument for doing nature-based therapy, is that we have evolved as humans in connection with nature, and that nature is where we truly belong, and that there is a calming influence and a health benefit to us being connected to nature. But what if we took that to the nth degree and said, will there ever be a time when humans evolve, quote unquote, way in the future, right? When we evolve so that we don't need connection to nature? Are we going to become so connected to technology that our brains evolve to like thrive on technology or something like that? I mean, it was totally a devil's advocate question, right? Or just a thinking exercise, because it's interesting to think and use logic and think through things like this. So, and someone on the call said, I wish I could remember who it was, but I don't exactly remember. I think I know, so I don't want to say who it was. So if it's you, like, shout yourself out in the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community and I'll give you props. But someone said, well, no, because the earth and us are so tied to each other. We're so intertwined. We are part of nature. So there's no way that we could ever evolve to where we don't need nature. And I just thought it was a cool response to the question, that just like referencing that interconnection that we have with the natural world, and that humans actually are part of nature herself. So like our health and the earth's health are like the yin and yang symbol. And this, in theory, this is called a non-dualism, right? So a duality is when something is two different separate things. But non-dualism means that nothing is all good, nothing is all bad. Everything is kind of nuanced and complex, right? And you can have independent things like a human and the earth, right? We're separate physically, but we're interdependent and all part of one big ecosystem, essentially. So I've had to think through this a lot in analyzing my research data, this concept of non-duality, because there are so many actors in the nature-based therapy process that it was really hard to disentangle them and like identify which actor was doing which thing in the process. So I'm working on that right now. I've made a lot of progress on my research. Actually, I'm feeling really good about it. I spent this last weekend, my son had a baseball tournament and my husband took him. So I had 2 days where I just worked for like 10 hours straight on my research and got a ton done. I'm feeling so much better. And I want to end this podcast by saying a thank you to all of you who participated and all of you who have sent encouraging messages to me on Instagram when I have been beating my head against a wall wanting to quit. So I appreciate you all sending me those encouraging words, because I really, really need it. I'm just feeling so weary at the end. So I hope that this episode encouraged you and gave you some thinking to do about starting a nature-based practice or program, or gave you some thinking to do about how your practice or program might be different than others out there, because this is only going to be a growing field, and it's so exciting to see. Like I want this to become mainstream. I want it to be so normal that there's outdoor therapy practices in all kinds of weather, in all kinds of settings and locations and iterations, paddleboarding clubs and surf clubs and hiking clubs and therapy services that are groups and swimming lessons and all kinds of things that therapists could do for kids that are outdoor therapy type services. So some of those might not be therapy per se, but yeah, that does bring up, actually, let me say this before I end. Like usual, I'm going longer than I thought. I do think that we need to think through when we offer services, that is a way, all those things I just mentioned, just random kind of outdoor things that came to mind. That is a way for you to actually make your services stand out, right? So if you are I knew a therapist who did this. She was a PT when I lived in Miami, my friend Teresa, and she taught swim lessons for kids. And she was a PT, and she did aquatic therapy as well. So she was able to, now she didn't charge the same for her swim lessons, but I guarantee you she could charge more for swim lessons as a PT if she wanted to. So I think that brings up a point of marketing your services as therapy. Actually, you have to be going through the therapy process, right? But it does set you apart to offer a service that is offered by a therapist, first of all, because you're very experienced, or is marketed as therapy if you're doing like a stand-up paddleboarding club, for example. So I don't know if I'm being clear on that. I was going to say I maybe need more coffee, but I'm drinking decaf now, so that can't be true. Maybe I've just been talking too long, y'all, so I'm going to wrap this up. So you can always ask me questions. Anything you hear on this podcast, you can ask me questions inside of the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community. Just post a comment underneath this podcast episode. I think this is 16, if I remember right. It might not be. I can't remember. So anyways, find the episode called Why Nature-Based Therapy is Here to Stay inside of the discussion, inside the TGO community. If you are not inside of the TGO community yet, you can join by going to TGO. That's for Therapy in the Great Outdoors, TGO, Therapy Great Outdoors. TGO.circle.s as in Sam O. TGO.circle.so. It's hosted on a platform called Circle, which is this awesome community platform that is just incredible. Easy to navigate, similar to a Facebook group, but with so many more features that allow us to really form community and be together in this space where you can easily access resources and discuss nature-based practice. So I'm excited for the potential of that site as the years come and as nature-based therapy grows even more and more. That's a good ending to this episode. So I love you all. I'll see you all soon inside of the community. Bye. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, exploring therapy in the great outdoors. If you liked what you heard in this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes so we can share the magic of nature-based therapy with a wider audience of therapists who work with children who desperately need connection to nature nowadays, just like we do. If you're ready to take the next step in this adventure, join our free Therapy in the Great Outdoors community at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. The TGO community is a private space just for nature-based pediatric practitioners. We have loads of resources there to support you as you start or grow a nature-based practice or program. Our free TGO community has a discussion forum, a jobs and volunteers board, a crowdsourced treatment activities section, as well as free video trainings, research article reviews, and book recommendations from yours truly. Head on over to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com to join today. So until next time, get outside, connect, reflect, and enjoy the business and practice of therapy in the great outdoors.